thoughtless and seems to take a real delight in giving me pain. Then I feel, Harry, that I have given away my whole soul to someone who treats it as if it were a flower to put in his coat, a bit of decoration to charm his vanity, an ornament for a summer's day. We could fit that into the allegory. And days in summer, Basil, are apt to linger, murmured Lord Henry. Perhaps you will tire sooner than he will. It is a sad thing to think of, but there is no doubt that genius lasts longer than beauty. That accounts for the fact that we all take such pains to overeducate ourselves. In the wild struggle for existence, we want to have something that endures. And so we fill our minds with rubbish and facts, in the silly hope of keeping our place. The thoroughly well-informed man. That is the modern ideal, and the mind of the thoroughly well-informed man is a dreadful thing. It is like a bric-a-brac shop, all monsters and dust, with everything priced above its proper value. Pause. That's quite a simile there. It's like a pawn shop where nothing is placed at its correct value. We value things more than we want. That's a scathing rebuke of education. Like, why do people put such value on the things that they learn in school when they're of no value to them in their lives? And why do we force other people to learn them? I think that's there. Now, I think you will tire first all the same. Someday you will look at your friend and he will seem to you to be a little out of drawing, or you won't like his tone of color, or something. You will bitterly reproach him in your own heart and seriously think that he has behaved very badly to you. The next time he calls, you will be perfectly cold and indifferent. This will be a great pity, for it will alter you. What you have told me is quite a romance of art, one might call it. And the worst of having a romance of any kind is that it leaves one so unromantic. Is that a hint that Lord Henry knows? He understands what Basil's real fear is, even though he's been pretending that he doesn't? Harry, don't talk like that. As long as I live, the personality of Dorian Gray will dominate me. You can't feel what I feel. You change too often. Ah, my dear Basil, that is exactly why I can feel it. Those who are faithful know only the trivial side of love. It is the faithless who know love's tragedies. And Lord Henry struck a light on a dainty silver case and began to smoke a cigarette with a self-conscious and satisfied air, as if he had summed up the world in a phrase. There was a rustle of chirping sparrows in the green lacquer leaves of the ivy, and the blue cloud shadows chased themselves across the grass like swallows. How pleasant it was in the garden, and how delightful other people's emotions were. Much more delightful than their ideas, it seemed to him. One's own soul and the passions of one's friends, those were the fascinating things in life. He pictured to himself with silent amusement the tedious luncheon that he had missed by staying so long with Basil Hallward. Had he gone to his aunt's, he would have been sure to have met Lord Goodbody there, and the whole conversation would have been about feeding the poor and the necessity for model lodging houses. Each class would have preached the importance of those virtues for whose exercise there was no necessity in their own lives. The rich would have spoken on the value of thrift, and the idle grown eloquent over the dignity of labor. It was charming to have escaped all that. That's social commentary, by the way. The rich of London always trying to solve the poor's problems, blaming the poor for being poor, for not working hard enough when all they did was sit around, smoke cigarettes, and talk about art. Oscar Wilde has taken a shot at the rich of London right here in this little bit by Lord Henry in his head, from his perspective. As he thought of his aunt, an idea seemed to strike him. He turned to Hallward and said, "My dear fellow, I've just remembered." "Remembered what, Harry?" "Where I heard the name Dorian Gray." "Where was it?" asked Hallward with a slight frown. "Don't look so angry, Basil. It was at my Aunt Agatha's. She told me she had discovered a wonderful young man who was going to help her in the East End." Pause, footnote. The East End is the poor end of London, the slums where all the poor people were, and that his name was Dorian Gray. I am bound to state that she never told me he was good-looking. Women have no appreciation of good looks. It's an ironic statement. At least, good women have not. She said that he was very earnest and had a beautiful nature. I had once pictured to myself a creature with spectacles and lank hair, horribly freckled, and tramping about on huge feet. I wish I had known it was your friend. I am very glad you didn't, Harry. Why? I don't want you to meet him. You don't want me to meet him? No. Mr. Dorian Gray is in the studio, sir, said the butler, coming into the garden. You must introduce me now, cried Lord Henry, laughing. The painter turned to his servant, who stood blinking in the sunlight. Ask Mr. Gray to wait, Parker. I shall be in a few moments. The man bowed and went up the walk. Then he looked at Lord Henry. Dorian Gray is my dearest friend, he said. He has a simple and beautiful nature. Your aunt was quite right in what she said of him. Don't spoil him. Don't try to influence him. Your influence would be bad. The world is wide and has many marvelous people in it. Don't take away from me, the one person who gives to my art whatever charm it possesses. My life as an artist depends on him. Mind, Harry, I trust you." He spoke very slowly, and the words seemed wrung out of him almost against his will. "What nonsense you talk," said Lord Henry, smiling, and taking Hallward by the arm, he almost led him into the house. End of chapter 1. Before I hit the button, I think there's one thing that's important to talk about here. He says that Dorian Gray has a simple and beautiful nature, and that Lord Henry would spoil him. Take this and attach it to the Garden of Eden and Adam before original sin and connect that to Dorian. Then this whole entire scene could be a scene in which God and Satan are having a conversation about Adam before the fall. And free will lets Satan do what he wants, and Adam react in a way that he wants to react, despite, what might happen. So clearly there's an allegorical thing going on here. The story's not developed enough to talk about some of the other themes, I don't think, but I think you can see them in there. So hopefully you enjoyed that chapter. You look forward to the next chapter and meeting Dorian Gray himself. I'll try and put that up tomorrow or the next day. We'll see.